My fiancé has ghosted me since he found out about my past. This happened a week ago, and I've not heard from him since. I've tried texting him, calling him, went to his apartment, went to his sister's house. I can't find him, and everybody is telling me that they haven't heard from him either. Everybody except his brother, who obviously did not get the memo like everyone else did to lie to me. He actually told me that Greg, not his real name, doesn't want to see or speak to me. A brief rundown on how we got here. We met 3 years ago at a church function. Yes, I know, Reddit hates religion, but it is what it is. I've had a very rough life when it comes to men, so I really don't engage any of them in conversation other than just briefly if I can get by with it. However, I was listening to Greg speak to a group of people about a book that I had just read, so I stood there and listened to him. After he was done talking, the group kind of hung around a little, and I asked him questions about the book. He answered every single one, and the more he talked, the more I was attracted to him. Now, this may not sound like much, but it was the first time that I was actually attracted to a guy since high school. As I said, rough experience, but suffice to say after I left high school, I got very involved with a very bad crowd. I turned to drugs, and when my family finally had all they could take, when I was 19, they kicked me out. I don't blame them for this, by the way, because I stole from them to feed my drug addiction. They tried many times to help me, but when I stole a very large sum of money from them and spent it on heroin, they had enough. Living from friend house to friend house, couch surfing for about 6 weeks, but still a junkie, I got caught stealing from them as well. I was homeless for 2 weeks, and honestly lived on a park bench for a couple of days. I decided to start stripping and everything that goes along with it. In other words, I was doing private parties, private dances, and yes, it quickly turned into just being paid for sex. I don't even remember a lot of that time because whenever I wasn't working, I was either high or working to get high. I did this for a few years. On my 23rd birthday, I overdosed. I had overdosed several times, but not to the point of not breathing, and I stopped breathing. The paramedics honestly saved my life because they did CPR on me and brought me back around. I was in the ICU for 3 days on a ventilator, and I had several IVs. While I was in the ICU, a preacher came by to see me. He was just a minister who goes and visits with families and patients. He came to me, and he spoke to me about how life has a higher purpose. He said a whole lot more, but I won't bore you with it. Needless to say, whether it was with him, me being fed up with my life, or God, I don't know, but it really moved me. And when I got out of the ICU, I asked them to help me get off all of the drugs. It worked. I've been clean since the day I left, and have never had a single desire to go back to that. It wasn't easy at first, but every day got better. I got a job, I reconnected with my family, and then I met Greg. I had never been in love, not even in high school, but after going on just a few dates, I was head over heels for him. On our 1-year anniversary, he asked me to marry him, but with the idea that it would be a year till the wedding. I happily agreed, and it's been the best time of my life. I felt the warmth every single day of his love. But then my mum and dad and I were making wedding plans. They wanted to pay, even though I told them not to, and one day while we were talking, they asked me what Greg knew about my past. They were asking if he knew about the drugs. My mum and dad don't fully know how far I sunk. The drugs were bad enough. My mum said that if Greg never asked, then I really should just keep it to myself. That I was a different person, and what was in the past should just stay in the past. My dad, however, said something that actually made sense at the time. I kind of regret listening to him now, though. He said that even though I had changed, who I was still a part of who I am, and hiding the past really is like lying. If Greg loved me, then he wouldn't care about the past, but if he ever found out on his own or some other way, then he might not be so forgiving because he might consider it a lie. So last weekend, I got all of the courage I could muster and decided to tell him everything. He knows things that my parents don't know, and now I feel very much betrayed. At first he thought I was joking, but when I reassured him that I was not, he kind of got quiet, and then he told me that he appreciated the honesty. He didn't know how he felt, and that he needed time to think. That has been a week now. I let him go Saturday through Saturday, with only texting him a couple of times, just letting him know that I still loved him, and making sure he was okay, and if he had any questions to ask me. Well, he never responded, and it's been a week since I've heard from him. I don't know what to do. He's been my rock since we got together. In times that I've been down, he has picked me up. When I've been sad, he has made me laugh. I truly hope that I've not hurt him. I think that would be the worst thing of all. I know my past life was disgusting, but it's been 6 years since I've been completely out of that life. I was in another city, actually even in another state, so there is no way that past life can come back to see me here. I made no friendships or relationships during that time, so there is nobody going to seek me out. Can anyone please tell me what I can say or do that will resonate with him? I really love him with all of my heart and will do anything to make this right. In the comments, longtime melon donor says, "You absolutely did the right thing here." I would reach out and say, "Look, I understand if you need time, I get it's a lot, but I need to know this is a 'I'm processing this' silence and not a 'goodbye' silence. I'm happy to answer anything else, but I told you this so that you know me as a whole, not just the me that I rebuilt from rock bottom." Finn141414 says, "You have an amazing story of recovery. I think your father really nailed it when he said to be honest, that if he loves you, he will understand. That said, it was undoubtedly a lot to take in, and I can't really say what he is thinking now, whether he'll be able to process this and come around, or if it will prove to be too much. I'm not sure what else you can do. You can't take it back, nor should you. You know him best. Does he believe in forgiveness, redemption, second chances? I hope he does. Your father gave you amazing advice. I would suggest that disclosure should come a lot earlier in the relationship though, like 4th or 5th date. Hey, before we go too far, there's something about my past I want you to know. Doing it earlier reduces the stakes. Some guys will be cool with it, some won't. It's best to know early on so you both can move on if it's a deal breaker. Your guy probably feels betrayed, like he doesn't know who you are and that you lied to him. You can't control his reactions, and maybe your relationship can't survive this. The ghosting approach isn't good, but he's dealing with a lot here too. I like the earlier suggested text. One last thing. The world is a messy place, and as an older person, let me tell you, everyone has baggage. Your past does not define you, and you deserve a partner who accepts you in your past. Back up to the post, there is an update. We are taking about a 30-minute emotional break. I asked for it, and he said he needed it as well. We've been at my place all afternoon talking. I'm not gonna lie, it's been rough. I've cried more today than I've ever cried in my life, but we are talking, and as of now, we are still together, just no longer engaged, at his request. By the way, all of the crying has not been sad cries. He's also been very open with his past, and it touched me that he felt compelled to be this open when he didn't have to. I don't know if anyone really cares, but I'll try and write a full update later tonight, but thank you all so much for the words of encouragement. It has helped me far more than you will ever know. Yeah, I understand that the ghosting was hard, and, I don't know if in this particular case it was an immature thing to do to ghost like that. I think I can understand his stance because that's a very heavy thing to drop on someone that I think he understandably needed time to process. I also think that you've handled it well by having this sit-down conversation with him, and him being open to you about his past is also a very good indication. Getting engaged within 1 year is a bit crazy, I won't lie. I've seen it before with a friend. Everyone thought that was crazy, especially given that they were way younger than you two in this story. Slowing it down a bit, holding off the engagement definitely is a good idea though. Don't go rushing into things, kids. That you have time. And now, on to the update. The title of the post was really inaccurate on my part because he did get in touch with me and we met for several hours on Sunday. So he didn't ghost me, he never intended to ghost me, and his family did not lie for him. In fact, we had time to talk at church. His brother came to me and apologized for the way that he handled my phone call. He said he clearly did not understand his brother's wish to be alone to think, and on his own interpreted that to mean that he didn't want to talk to me. The rest of his family had no idea that there was any significant problem and didn't know where he was because he went away for the week and told them to only contact him for any emergencies. Obviously they knew something was up, but had no idea. So the ghosting part was a combination of miscommunication and, well, honestly, just anxiety and impatience on my part. We both apologized over that and moved on. Anyway, we met at church for morning service, and I got there first and went and sat in our usual spot, and he got there just as the service was starting, but he came over and sat down beside me, and we shared a quick smile as the service started. I was dying on the inside. After service was over, people were shaking hands talking. This is when his brother came to me to apologize, and while we were talking, he slipped away and talked to a few other people. I have a feeling this was planned, but whatever. He came back over and asked how I was, and I almost lost it, but I held it together and said that I was okay, but obviously I was tearing up as we were talking. He asked if I wanted to talk now or later, and I just wanted to get it over with because if he was going to break up with me, I just wanted it to be done and over with so I could go home and start the grieving. So I just said I'm ready. He said he really wanted to talk somewhere private and asked where I would prefer to go, and all I could think of was my place so I didn't have to drive when it was all over with. He followed me home and came inside and said that he really wanted this to be civil. Not a good sign. By this time, I was already a bundle of nerves, so I just blurted out, "Are you going to leave me?" Obviously, I'm crying as I say this. What he said next left me with a lot of hope because I really thought this was a done deal. He said that a lot of what happens going forward would depend on what I said that day with him and how much I wanted to tolerate from him. That last part really confused me, but I was just so relieved that he didn't say yes that I basically collapsed into my chair and told him that I was ready to do whatever it took. He then said that if that was the case, then he would ask for two things from me, and that was honesty and patience. He started off apologizing to me for not being a better man. Well, that was all I could take, and when he said that, the floodgates came open. Here was this wonderful man who I basically lied to and dropped probably what I can only imagine from a man's point of view, being one of the worst things you could ever tell a future spouse, and he was apologizing to me. I had to hug him and tell him not to apologize to me. He held me as I cried for a few minutes, but then tried to gather myself to listen to him. He went on to say that he had a horrible week. He said he had come face to face with a lot of his own insecurities, jealousies, and prejudices. He also said that he learned something about himself, and he didn't like what he learned. He said up until I told him my story that he didn't realize that he was very possessive and had a jealous streak. He talked a lot about it, but I'll skip that because it was really personal, and well, this is already going to be the length of a book. He then asked me if I was willing to put up with him having some very probing questions and some very personal comments about them. Again, I said I was going to do whatever it took. So, he asked the following questions. 1. Did I use protection every time? 2. Did I have any interaction with anyone sexually in the city that we live in now? 3. Did I have any idea of how many people I had sex with? 4. Have I been tested for any sexually transmitted diseases? And if so, when was the last time? And did I keep records of it? And 5. Am I willing to be tested again and even again in the future? 6. Did I ever have sex with anyone without them being a customer? 7. What types of drugs did I take? 8. When was the last time I took drugs? 9. Do I feel any need or desire to take drugs or any other substances since this incident occurred? 10. How can I guarantee to him that I won't in the future turn back to drugs? 11. Does sex have any real meaning for me, and do I enjoy it, or is it just something I do now to be close to him? 12. How much money did I steal? 13. Did I pay back the money? 14. Have I ever stolen any money or anything else without it being for drugs? And 15. How can I guarantee to him that I won't steal from him in the future? This took several hours to answer because I often had to stop to compose myself, but I answered every one of his questions as honestly as I could. He often told me that I didn't have to answer them if I didn't want to, and kept apologizing for asking, but he said that to go forward with anything, he knew that he had to know or he just wouldn't be able to. He then listed out his concerns and asked if I really wanted to work with him on them, and he would understand if I didn't want to. I said I wouldn't be here if I didn't want this. So his concerns were as follows. A. He's afraid that if times get rough in the future for whatever reason, I might steal from him or his family. Honestly, I was surprised by this, as this was not something I thought would be an issue, but it was the first thing that he talked about. Now, to be fair, his family owns a business, they are not rich, but they are not poor either, so I guess he's worried when he takes over that I might steal. B. In his words, he has an irrational fear that once a junkie, always a junkie, and he said he doesn't know how strong he is, and it would kill him if we stayed together and I sunk back into that world. And C. His fear that sex would be an issue going forward. He said that he has had horrible intrusive thoughts all week. The fact that I've been with so many people and done so many different things that nothing would ever be special, and ultimately he was afraid that he would become bitter because he would feel like we were just having sex for him, and that knowing that I would just be participating would really make his desire to have sex with me drop significantly. Again, I listened to him and I answered every concern to what I could. He said he knew a lot of this was nothing I could ever really guarantee, but he just had to talk about it. I told him that I understood, and I had already suspected some of this would come up. As I said, we spent several hours going over this stuff. We had to take a couple of breaks so that way our emotions would not get the better of us. He really went through the range of emotions himself, but I knew that I had to let him if I wanted this to work. He told me that he was willing to stay and try to make this work because he really loved me. Obviously, my heart leapt at this, and I cried again. You would think with everything that I've been through, I would have been tougher than this, but he said that he didn't feel like we could go through with the wedding as scheduled, and that in all honesty, he would like to end our engagement and stay dating, exclusively of course, for a while. He said in all honesty, he felt like while he believes me and feels like he knows me, he wants to take the time to look at this from a new perspective. This is where the part about feeling like he didn't really know me comes in. I took off my ring to give it to him, and for the first time, he broke down and cried. He told me to put it back on, and that he just wants to postpone the wedding, not end the engagements. I told him that we could do whatever he thought we had to do. He said we're just going to tell people that we're going to postpone the date due to scheduling conflicts, and we would let them know a new date. Then we had to decide what we were going to be telling family. He said from his side of the family that he's going to tell them that he was feeling pressured at work and that he got upset over a misunderstanding about time away. I told him that I would say whatever he wanted. He said that it was best to not tell anyone else about my past except for our minister, who we're going to go to start couples counseling with. We both agreed to this. As to my family, well, this is where the one problem we had that day came up. He just assumed that my family knew. I told him they only knew about the drugs and stealing. He said that he thought my parents should know because they're paying for the wedding and it will cause some problems cancelling events and stuff, and he didn't want them to think that this was just because I used drugs years ago. It wasn't a deal breaker for him, he said, but it was something he felt was right, but would abide by whatever I thought was best. I really do not want to tell my parents. What I did was bad enough, stealing and doing drugs, but if they knew that I stripped and prostituted myself, I don't think I could ever look them in the eye again, and they have been so wonderful to me since I've come back. So in conclusion, this ended better than I ever dreamed possible. Yes, I know he has a diminished view of me. He really was upset that I waited so long to tell him, but I had to know that this was inevitable, and he said once he gets over the initial shock, he will try his best to never bring it up again. He truly is a wonderful man, and I am so very lucky that God put him in my life. In the comments, Zen Moonstone says, I wish the best for you. You did the right thing being honest. Your fiancé loves you, and hopefully this will bring you closer and help build a stronger foundation. I would recommend offering to pay your parents for any cancellation fees, even if you have to pick up a part-time job on the weekends to make that happen. JohnBoy374 says, my daughter disappeared for a few years due to drug addiction. Fortunately, she came out the other side, and now she is happy and healthy and has a little boy. I know there were other things that happened that I don't know about. I don't want to know, it doesn't help me in any way. In fact, it would just hurt me. And I know that it would hurt her for hurting me again. Honesty is the best policy. Do you honestly want to reopen old wounds? Chances are, like me, they know deep down that other things happened, but they accepted you back, and you're walking the walk. Leave it at that, and live your best life. Good luck to you. Jinxity says, if your fiancé is worried what your parents will think about him postponing the wedding, instead of telling them about your past, you can say that you pushed for the postponement because you wanted him to have time to absorb everything and to re-establish trust. If you present it as mutual, they won't think that he's overreacting. Or just say that he wants to take time to rebuild trust because you plan on being together for a very long time. So there's no need to rush to marriage. There are ways to shift the blame, for lack of a better term, off your fiancé that don't involve telling your parents the things that you'd rather they not know. And I agree with others that they don't need to know, especially as you have to put that part of your life behind you. And OP replies, thank you so much for this. Sometimes things that are so simple and right in front of you are just not obvious. This is in fact so simple and spot on that it's brilliant. And now onto the new update. First off, things have been great between us. I mean, there have been issues, but nothing that I didn't expect, nor anything that I can't handle. I still am happy that he is in my life. When I last left off, he asked me to tell my parents because he was afraid that they would think that he was being overly critical of a previous drug habit, but he also told me that he wouldn't make that a deal breaker. He just thought that it would be a good idea. Well, after thinking about it more, I just felt like I didn't want to have to tell my parents that part of my life. I believed with all of my heart that they would have supported me, but I just didn't want to go through all of the emotions of telling them. I explained it to them, and he was fine with it. Said that he respected my thoughts on it and would never say a word to them. I decided on my own to tell them that we are postponing the wedding. I told them after we had talked that he wanted to stay together and that he just wanted more time to think about things. I thought that this was best, as I didn't want him to be there to have to explain anything, because if something would have come up, I didn't want him to feel trapped. I told them. They were disappointed, obviously, but they understood. He had given me money to give them to pay back their deposits, but they said that they didn't want it, and for us to keep the money. I thought that was the end of it, but was I ever wrong? He came over for Thanksgiving dinner. He had lunch with his family. I was invited, but couldn't attend due to not getting off till late from work, and then having to help my mum make dinner here. He got to my parents' house around 4 or so, and we ate dinner at 5:30. My parents, both sets of grandparents, and several cousins were there. Dinner went fine. We ate and everybody was having a good time until my cousin, who was several years younger than me, 12, asked when we were getting married. There was a long, it seemed forever, awkward silence, and he just sat there looking at me for guidance. He spoke up and said, probably next summer. To which my mother's mother heard this, and obviously nobody had told them that the date was off. Well, she proceeded to ask if she had the dates wrong in her calendar, to which my mum quickly jumped in to just say that there was scheduling conflicts. Well, that should have been it, but instead of accepting that, my grandmother starts asking what the scheduling conflicts were. If it was the church or minister, she was going to get this straightened out. This went on for a good half hour, and I could just tell by the look on his face that he was sick of it. He never said a word, but he looked almost very upset. Finally, my family starts to leave at about 8:30 or so, and after everyone says their goodbyes, he and I go back to the living room and sit on the couch. I apologize profusely to him, and he says he's fine, but I can tell that he's not really fine, but he's starting to be less tense. My parents come back in from the front porch after telling their parents goodbye, and they sit down, and my dad apologized to both of us, saying that our family means well, but sometimes can be overbearing. The three of us laugh, but I notice my mum not laughing. My mum proceeds to take a bad situation that was under control and actually ending, and decides to dump buckets of gasoline on it. She said that she felt bad for her mum because she thought she was upset because my grandfather, my mum's dad, is having health issues, and they were afraid that he wouldn't live to see my wedding. Here is where it goes to hell. She said it was silly to postpone things over a drug addiction that hasn't been a problem for several years. Oh my god. Oh, that's too good. That's so funny. My boyfriend just sat there, but I could physically both see and feel him tense up. I was holding his hand. My dad spoke up, and he and my mum started arguing over it, and by what they were saying to each other, I could tell that they had talked about this after I told them, which was no surprise really, and I could tell that even though my dad was trying to be polite and make my mum shut up, that he pretty much felt the same way. I just couldn't take it anymore. I felt absolutely horrible for Greg. He not only had to sit there for my grandparents, he was now having to sit there for my parents, and everybody is blaming him for all of this. It wasn't fair to him. I spoke up, and I told my parents that I had to talk to them, and that they needed to stop arguing and stop blaming Greg for any of this. He squeezed my hand, indicating to me that I should stop. I looked at him, and he shook his head no. I told him that this was not fair to him, and ultimately, it wasn't fair to them either because they were blaming him for the wrong reasons. Obviously, this got their attention. I went ahead and told them that after they had kicked me out of my own house, I had no home, no job, no education, no skills, no nothing. I only told them that I became an exotic dancer. I just couldn't bring myself to tell them more. But they're not dumb. My mum immediately gasped and started to cry. My dad just sat there dumbfounded and tried to calm my mum down. My mum, after being basically hysterical for a few minutes, apologized to Greg. She said she had no idea and that he was a wonderful man for staying with me even knowing that. Whoa! Oh my god, what do you mean by that, Mum? That's crazy. That is an insane statement for your own mother to make. Not sure how I feel about that statement, but I guess in the end, she was coming from a good place, I think. Nothing like that good motherly love, huh? But the main thing was that it did take the blame off of him. My dad welcomed him to the family by saying this was just a typical Thanksgiving, trying to be funny. Yeah, this is just your run-of-the-mill Thanksgiving, yep. I asked Greg if he would mind if I talked with my parents, and I would see him on Friday. I walked him out, and we kissed goodnight, and I told him how wonderful I thought he was, and he told me that I didn't need to tell them, that he wasn't going to say anything. I said I knew he wouldn't, but it was just going to never get better with them unless they knew the truth. I went back in and spent the next several hours talking with my parents. Needless to say, it was heartbreaking on several levels. My dad openly cried, and I've never even seen that. He blames himself for this. He said that he never should have kicked me out, and that he ruined my life. No matter what I said or did, I could not console him. My mum tried as well, but nothing was working. We all went to bed, and I was woken up by my mum panicking, calling 911. My dad was having chest pain. The ambulance came and said he was having a heart attack and took him to a hospital that specializes in heart problems. My dad looked horrible, and I was scared more than I ever have been. I called Greg, and he came and picked up my mum and I and drove us to the hospital. They would not let us back to see him as they rushed him into the surgery, and the doctor came out telling us that the ambulance most likely saved his life by recognizing what was happening, and that a surgeon was with him putting in stents, and had basically already used like a plunger or something to get rid of a blood clot that they found. We called our minister, and he was there within half an hour. My dad is scheduled to come home tomorrow. He looked great tonight and said he felt perfectly fine. Greg has been a rock for both me and my mum. When he left to go get us food, my mum actually told me that I needed to make sure to keep him because the only man she knew that was better was my dad. Guys, I don't know how to feel about mum's comments. They always kind of feel backhanded. That's better than the last one, but I don't know about that. I'm just grateful that my dad is going to be okay. Greg said tonight when he dropped me off at home that life is never dull with me. We both laughed. I have to try and help my dad realize that what he did was tough love and that he can't blame himself for my poor choices. He didn't just kick me out after the first, second, or even 23rd time. They tried for a couple of years to reach me, but I just wasn't having it. I spoke with my minister about therapy for my dad, and he said that he will speak to him as his minister and recommend another therapist if my dad is open to it. Hopefully, this should put an end to any updates. I know that Greg is the love of my life, and I am doing anything in my power to make sure he knows how much he means to me and how I will never betray his trust in me. In the comments, Don't139 says, "What exactly did the parents think OP was doing to survive? When you get addicted to heroin, there's not many jobs around that allow you to fund your fixes. OP's mum really rubs me the wrong way. Even if it was just for an addiction that was long gone, Greg would have been valid in wanting to postpone, because any reason is a good reason, because the only two people concerned are him and OP. If he feels like he needs time, then so be it. Getting pressured into marriage never ends well. She tried to guilt trip them into not postponing, and then said that Greg was such a great guy for not dumping OP like the damaged goods that she is. Greg's reaction through all of this only shows that he is human. He rationally knew that OP was the person he had known for a year, but that kind of info is a lot to process for anybody, and having to talk through it is normal. Healthy, even, because he chose communication instead of burying his head in the sand. He confronted the issue head-on. He wanted to know. Unlike OP's mum, who never wondered how her daughter managed to live all this time. I hope they have a good life together, and do not let anyone guilt-trip them into anything." I think you can already tell that I'm on board with this comment. What was with the mum's commentary? She should just shut her mouth at this point. I get why she's saying those things, I get the place that it's coming from, but given that initial comment of, "Oh, I'm so surprised you stayed with her," your husband should have been in your ear saying, "Stop being insane. Please stop saying insane, inflammatory shit." Anyway, Greg is amazing. Greg is human. Greg is a rational and caring person. I respect Greg. I respect OP for doing everything she could to bridge the gap with her family and Greg. That must have been an incredibly awkward Thanksgiving. That would not have been a fun time. I don't even think I want to be a fly on the wall in that one, because it's not like, Impractical Jokers levels of cringe. This is like, oh my god. I'm watching a lot of hatred and confusion going on right now that, these people can't even be filled in on the full story because it's just going to make things worse. But hey, what a story. Thank you for sharing that with us, OP. You didn't have to, but I'm very glad you came to the internet to kind of get an unbiased perspective on this. I think that really helped you out here. I think that Reddit did a good job helping them. So thank you for the story, thank you for the multiple updates, and I hope that everyone else listening enjoyed the story too. And that's all I have for you today, guys. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. With that said, I hope you have a good day, night, sleep, whatever you're up to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!